Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today, we're talking with Visla Rudiger, a transgender attorney, about her experiences in the legal profession, at work, in court, and more. Your Law School Toolbox host today is Alison Monahan, and typically I'm here with Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. Together, we're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started. Welcome back. Today, we're talking with Visla Rudiger, a transgender attorney, about her experiences in the legal profession, at work, in court, and more. So, welcome. Can you give our listeners a bit of your backstory for some context?
Sure. I am 32 years old. I have been practicing law for 8 years.
Wow, so you started early.
I started law school when I was 21. I went to William & Mary. I've lived in Virginia my entire life. I currently practice in southeastern Virginia. Let's see. I spent my first 3 years at a mid-sized regional law firm doing complex civil litigation, medical malpractice defense, and intellectual property claims. And now I've spent the past 5 years as in-house counsel. I'm still a litigator technically, but I appear in court maybe once a month as compared to way more frequently when I was at the firm. But I'm the only lawyer at the company that's not afraid of court. So that makes me the litigator.
Right. It's a good skill set to have. I clerked for a district court judge and I was a litigator too. So there's definitely something about just being comfortable in that environment.
Though it's funny how quickly you feel like not a litigator when you're not in court every day. But anyway, so yeah, that's what I do now, and that's what I've done for a while. And apropos of the topic of your show, I am a trans femme non-binary attorney. So
right. So could you? I mean, that's what you said when we were corresponding. For somebody who might be kind of unfamiliar with this topic or unfamiliar with some of that terminology, can you kind of break that down, walk me through what that means? Sure.
I'm going to start at the end. So non-binary means that I do not identify fully as a man or a woman. I explain it to people that gender is a spectrum, like most things.
Right.
Very, very few things in the world are black and white. And so gender, if you want to imagine it as a scale from like 1 to 10, if 1 was completely male and 10 was completely female, I fall somewhere like an 8.
Okay.
And so the funny thing is when I was first giving that explanation, I think I said like 6.
Right.
So
I was like, an 8 seems pretty high to me. I'm thinking like, I'm probably like maybe an 8. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Back when I always thought that gender was definitely like a spectrum, but even back when I identified as male, I was like, well, I'm probably more like a 3, and that number has gone steadily up over the
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking for me, I'm like, well, I'm not really like that girly girl. Like, okay, I'm not a 10 then. I'm not a 9. Maybe I'm an 8. I don't know. Sometimes I'm kind of androgynous, my dress. Like, but I think I think it is interesting this. People have all kinds of viewpoints on this, but I think when you think about it, of course, like we all kind of define where we are on that spectrum on any given day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's non-binary. I identify as trans because I am transgender. I do not identify with the gender I was assigned at birth. So when I was born, my parents thought I was a boy, so they named me as a boy and they raised me as a boy.
Right.
And so being transgender means not identifying with that kind of initial assessment that you were given as a child.
Which I would imagine can be surprising to people later.
Yes. I have gotten the full gamut of responses from, absolute loving acceptance and excitement to complete rejection. So, and then I describe myself as trans femme rather than trans female because, like I said, I'm non-binary, so I'm towards the feminine end of the spectrum, and so that's what I say. The other thing that I always include in my bio is that I'm also a parent.
Oh, wow.
I have a 3.5-year-old son.
Okay.
Well, son for now. He can be whatever he wants.
Yeah, you think that. That's the choice you've made.
As a boy. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, that's me, and that's what those terms mean. The one thing that I would say is that terminology changes really rapidly, and a lot of people have a lot of different feelings about certain terms. I think the ones that I've used and described here are pretty neutral, that they're things that aren't particularly controversial, at least among open-minded people. But it's always important to just respect the terminology that people use for themselves, because not every person is going to feel like, is going to define non-binariness in the exact same way. Or some people might say that I'm gender fluid because I've changed how I feel about things, but I don't really identify with that term. So there's all kinds of terms. And I think the best thing you can do is just kind of work with whoever you're dealing with to, accept however they've chosen to express their gender. And it's so complicated. It's complicated for us. It's complicated for our friends. And so it's always just good to be open-minded and let people define themselves however they want.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think sometimes, there are a lot of people out there who probably, particularly depending on where they live or what kind of exposure they've had and to different things, maybe thinking like, okay, this all sounds like interesting, kind of foreign to me, but I'm open about it. Do you have any resources or places they can look to kind of say, okay, these are the basics, like I understand, the basics of these terminology, I don't want to say something offensive, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I think a lot of LGBT advocacy groups have pretty good resources for one of the best things that I've seen are some of the media resources that people list where, if a reporter is going to try to talk about something and they're not familiar, it gives them just like step by step. Here's what every one of these words is.
Yeah, I looked up, I found some of those. I can't remember if it was the one. I think GLAAD had a really good one.
Yeah, I was just looking at GLAAD myself before we got on the podcast, and they have a pretty good one. Like I said, no one person's opinion is going to cover everything and be perfect. But when I read through theirs, I was like, yeah, this is all very straightforward. It's understandable and it's respectful. So, I would recommend that to any listener who is open-minded but confused.
Right. Or just generally not even confused, just generally kind of uninformed. I think a lot of people are. I grew up in rural North Carolina.
And then North Carolina has had some bad times.
Yeah, but then I moved to San Francisco, so I've had kind of exposure to both aspects of this. And, I think about people that maybe I grew up with who would just be like, whoa, like this is just weird,
It's very interesting because Southeastern Virginia is fairly metropolitan. It's like one of the larger population areas in the state other than Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. And you have a lot of people from a lot of different areas who live here either temporarily or permanently. But you also have a big military presence. And then if you drive for an hour in any direction, you're in the middle of nowhere all of a sudden.
Right.
And so you meet a wide variety of people with a wide variety of experiences.
Yeah, I would imagine. I grew up in a town of literally 6,000 people in North Carolina. So yeah, it was a lot. But even there, I think about people I know and like they might be, they're not necessarily closed-minded. A lot of them are, but a lot of them aren't. But I think, they just kind of need a place to start.
I've been the first trans person that I think a lot of people have met. And that can be a really daunting experience for both sides.
Right. Well, kind of talk to me about that. What are some of the key challenges or obstacles that you faced? And was it the same thing that you thought you would face, or were you kind of encountering new and unexpected challenges along the way?
Well, so it was, everyone's experience is going to be unique, but mine, one of my friends described it to me as, he said, Visla, you went from 0 to trans in like a week. Okay,
because I was going to ask
and
about
I really
that.
did. It's not something that I took flippantly or anything like that, but it's something that I had felt in a non-dramatic way for a lot of my life. I know a lot of people genuinely have suffered their entire life and have felt that there's something deeply wrong and have powerful dysphoria about their bodies and their identities. And I hadn't had that experience. I always felt a little weird. I felt like things were off. I would always say, like, I'm just a really effeminate guy. Like, it's, I would make excuses for my tendencies towards in dress and in preferences and things. And I would always just be like, yeah, I'm a guy, but
just not like a guy.
Yeah, it's just like, I'm not just like a macho guy. And that was fine for a while. But then over time, it just built up. And I met a bunch of people who were LGBT, and some of them were trans feminine, and I talked to them, and I became very good friends with them over the course of a couple of years. And then over the course of a couple weeks, honestly, I was just like, is this happening? Like, I think this is a thing that's real. And the first thing I did was I first contextualized it as coming out as non-binary. Okay. I was like, that's really what's going on, is I'm non-binary, and I just need to come out with that, and that'll be fine. And so I talked to some of my close friends about it. I talked to my wife about it at the time. I've since become separated. Okay. Yeah, and everyone was like, oh yeah, that's great. We really support you. And we think this is great for you. And I was like, yeah, all it means is, it doesn't really change anything. It's not really a big deal. And so within a week of that, I went into my office and I was like, hey, this is how I feel. And it was during Pride of last year. And I went in and I was like, hey, like, so this is what this means. I'm non-binary. And I remember one of the things I specifically told people was, I mean, this doesn't necessarily change anything. Like, some days I might wear a dress, some days I might not. I have not worn pants since that day.
That's funny.
Like, I've worn pajama pants, but I have worn like a skirt or a dress every day.
Okay.
And so once the floodgates opened, it was just like, okay, I'm trans now. I want to transition. I'm going to start taking hormones. I'm going to change my name. I went by neutral pronouns for about a month. I went by they, them. But it was very rapid that I was like, no, this is not for me. I want to be she, her. So that's what I've gone by ever since. I picked the name Visla actually right out of the gate because I was like, it's kind of an ambiguous name. People don't know what to do with it. So that's totally fine. But then I just stuck with that. I really enjoy it. So,
I mean, this must have been pretty shocking to people, I would imagine.
Yeah. Shock was the first emotion that I got from most people.
Okay. I mean, was that what you expected to get?
I did. It was actually, I'd say the most surprising thing was how positive most people were.
Okay.
I didn't get any immediately negative reactions.
Okay.
I got some very guarded, confused reactions. And I think the one thing I wish that I had done a little bit differently when I was coming out is given people more time to react before being like, tell me what you think. Like, you're giving a forever answer to this.
And did you tell people generally, I mean, was this a conversation or in person?
Yeah. So, I mean, anyone I could do it with in person, I did it in person.
Okay.
The first person I talked to, other than people I was consulting with to decide how to go about it, was my then wife. And she was immediately supportive. One of the first things I said to her was like, look, if this is going to mess things up for us, I don't even want to start going down this road. And so that was number one. But at the same time, I didn't appreciate how difficult it would be for someone to give an immediate answer. Not that I would change anything I'm going to do. It's not like I'm asking their permission.
Right.
At the same time, I think I could have given people a little bit longer to process before being like, okay, now react and tell me everything you think.
Right. Because I mean, part of it is that you've had at least some amount of time to think about this. It's not the very first time that you're hearing about it.
So yeah, it was interesting. I told her, I told my parents, I told my boss before I told my parents.
Oh, wow. Okay.
As it happens, my father works at the same company that I do. So
Well,
he was being told as part of the like work people, but he was down the line from my actual direct supervisor who I told first. And everyone at work was pretty positive. It was really funny. You could basically gauge how long and complicated the conversation was going to be by generation.
right. Well, I mean, that's kind of my understanding is that younger people are just generally more familiar, more comfortable. I mean, my sister, for example, works in a nonprofit in Oakland, and they're kind of known as like a friendly workplace. And she's like, oh, this is like nothing. Everyone on their email has like what pronouns they are, you know?
Right, exactly. And I think for almost everyone at that office, I was the first transgender person they had ever met in person. Mm-hmm. Like, this is the first encounter they had with the whole concept outside of things they'd seen on the news, which do not exactly give the best perspective.
Probably, yeah, not so favorable.
Especially here, we're right on the border of North Carolina, right, yeah. And so there were so many of it was peak bathroom bills at the time that I came out, so it was not fun.
Not ideal.
So anyway, that's kind of how that went initially. Mm-hmm. And it was mostly good. I won't lie. I basically lost half my family. Okay. My mother's side of the family is not supportive.
That's unfortunate.
My grandmother called one time, ostensibly to wish me happy birthday, except she refused to call me by my legal name.
Yeah, and that's not nice.
He was just like, hey, dead name. And I was like,
nope. That person doesn't exist, actually.
I was like, that's wrong name. And she's like, no, it's this. I'm like, no, it's not. And she's like, you're so hateful. And I'm like, okay, that's your problem. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Happy birthday to me.
Yeah. So that was actually in April of this year. So like, that's not even like right after.
Right.
Because I came out in June of last year. So it's not a failure of time to get used to it. She just doesn't want to. Right. And there are people like that. And I do my best to just not let them get to me.
Well, I mean, I think, and this as with any other sort of family-oriented issue, there's a limited amount you can really do. People are going to do what they do, basically.
And to give some credit where credit's due for the older generation, my grandfather on my dad's side has been one of the most supportive people of anyone that I've ever talked to.
Interesting.
The first thing he said when I told him about it was, he said, I loved you when you were a little kid. I loved you when you were a boy. I loved you when you were a man, and I will love you as a woman. And he gave me a big hug.
Oh, that's amazing.
I still cry every time I think about that.
I know, I'm tearing up.
So, like, it's not all. There are definitely going to be people who are going to be like my grandmother, but fortunately, the folks like my granddad make a way bigger impact. So.
Yeah, I mean, what advice do you have for someone who maybe is considering this and thinks that their family, or parts of their family may not be supportive? I mean, what can they do? Are there people they can lean on? Any techniques?
Be prepared.
I
mean, there's really nothing you can do to change their minds. Don't try to argue with them. You don't have to justify yourself to them, is what I would say. Mm-hmm. Is you are telling them this. You're not asking them. You don't have to beg them. You don't have to get their approval. You're telling them because you care about them. And if they care about you, they'll listen and they'll get used to it. I have tried to be patient with some members of my family, and I've seen some progress from that.
Right. I mean, one of the things I would do, it hasn't been that long. I have stories.
No. I mean, it hasn't even been a full year.
I knew people that I grew up with in North Carolina who only came out as gay, and their parents for 2 years wouldn't speak to them, but now they've come around and everyone gets along. It's possible, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that happening to some degree. I think I will always have a little bit of difficulty with anyone who
understandably
took that amount of time. But yeah, I would say give them the time they need, and don't feel like you have to engage with them. Like, if they need time, then they can take that time to themselves, and you don't owe them your suffering with them. Like, you don't owe them sitting there being misgendered and being called the wrong name and all that stuff, you can just let them deal with their own issues. And when they're ready, they can come around to you.
Yeah, I say, like, you really don't have to go to Thanksgiving. It's fine. You can do something else.
I had the best Thanksgiving I have my entire life this past year by not going anywhere.
Yeah, it's really very liberating.
It was nice. So yeah, that's how it was with family. Work was a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. How so?
So I was kind of in the position of, I'm their attorney, and so I had to kind of advise them, like, I said straight up, like, this is a weird situation, but I'm coming out to you like this. Let me give you a general idea of what the law is on this.
Right. Well, talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, what kind of protections, if any, do people have uniformly or in different areas?
So it's something that there's a lot of disagreement on. Mm-hmm. The position of the federal government up until the current administration was that transgender people are protected. And the EEOC had taken that position, and some of the federal courts had taken that position. But now the Attorney General has come out with an opinion that reverses that, at least as far as the government's concerned. That doesn't change the decisions of the courts. That doesn't change the decision of the EEOC, but it does change whether government agencies are going to be helping.
Right.
And so that can kind of turn things around from a practical perspective. All of that is under gender discrimination. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of a matter of interpreting this and saying, it's not that transgender people are protected. It's that I'm protected because I'm being treated differently because of my gender.
Right.
And so...
which totally makes sense to me, legally speaking.
Yeah, it should be straightforward. It really should, but it's not.
Right.
And you're getting different decisions from different places. And depending on what state you live in, you have a completely different experience.
Right. A lot of these states and localities have different rules, right?
Exactly. Virginia has been working in a positive direction, fortunately, and started to implement this stuff in the state government, where the governor can simply just by order outlaw discrimination based on certain things. Okay. And he's done that for state employees. Obviously, that's a really limited group, right? But it shows the way that the state is trying to go. Mm-hmm. And so what I would say is there's protection out there, but don't think that you have a slam dunk. Right. It's not as if it's racial discrimination or straightforward sex discrimination. You will probably not have the help of the federal government, and you would be best off looking at your local laws and protections if they exist, because they'll be a lot clearer and they'll probably be a lot more current. Mm-hmm. So that's where I am there.
So you kind of advise your workplace, there's probably not really that much that I can do if you decide to discriminate against me, and then what happens?
I did. Honestly, I was completely honest with them. I said, look, you can probably fire me and get away with it. I really hope you don't want to, and I'll fight you if you do, but please don't. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that was like a pretty good icebreaker with most of the executives that I talked to, because they know that I'm not trying to start trouble. Right. Like I'm not here to instigate a lawsuit. I just want to keep my job and enjoy my life.
Right.
The one thing that being kind of the first encounter with this issue brought about was our HR staff had no idea what they were supposed to. They tried. Everyone was nice. Like everyone tried very hard to use the right name and do mm-hmm. the right stuff. But a lot of mistakes were made just out of ignorance. Okay. There was this document that I remember being shown, and they had gotten it from outside counsel somewhere. So like some law firm somewhere thought this was a good idea. Mm-hmm. And it is probably the most offensive thing I've ever seen.
In terms of how to handle this type of situation or what?
Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to read you a paragraph from this.
Great.
Because most people have not been exposed to gender transition, it is likely that coworkers will make mistakes. such as referring to the employee in gender transition by the wrong name or pronoun, or asking inappropriate questions. Employees in transition should gently correct a coworker who makes a mistake. It is assumed that mistakes will be less frequent after a reasonable period of time. Wow.
Wow.
So
yeah.
It acknowledges that the questions are inappropriate. It uses the word inappropriate, but then it tells me that
it's your problem. You need to be polite.
I need to be polite. Like, another one was, other than the fact of gender transition, the employee should not discuss medical condition or procedures with other company employees. Employees should keep medical information confidential. Discussion of such information at the workplace is a breach of confidentiality.
Of your own confidentiality?
Yeah, it's my confidentiality.
That doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yes, I'm not going to overshare with my coworkers, but you don't get to tell me what I get to talk about with people. If they want to know, if they want to talk to me about what I'm doing, I'm not under a gag order.
Right. I mean, I think the flip side of that is really more the issue. Like, it's probably impolite for someone to ask you those details, but
that is something that people need to get through their heads, that it's not any more appropriate to ask about what's in my pants than what's in any other person's pants. Like, right. Just because I'm trans doesn't give you license to ask those questions.
Well, I mean, for me, I kind of think about it the same way that I would deal with like a perceived pregnancy. And people ask me all the time, like, are you pregnant? I'm like, no, I'm not pregnant. You're just offensive. But I mean, for me, even very close friends who, for whatever reason, decided not to reveal to the world that they were having a child until the child arrived. Even if I know that, I'm not bringing it up. It's not my business.
Yeah, people will tell you if they want to, and it's a completely wide range of opinions. And another thing that I think a lot of people assume about anyone who's trans is that they are undergoing a medical transition. That's not the case. Not every person undergoes hormone therapy, and even fewer people undergo surgical transition.
Right.
I think the media portrays it as if anyone who's transgender is having the surgery, and like that's the holy grail of transition, and it's not. It's up to every individual. And so it's interesting. But that was what I encountered. I had a meeting with our vice president and our HR director, and I shouted about this document for like 2 hours.
I mean, did they distribute this? Like,
no, it was only to me, thankfully. But I mean, like, stuff about this was going to be like official. They wanted me to sign a document that like included these things, and I was like, "This is profoundly wrong. Have you read this?" Like, and once they understood what it said. Like, because it uses all the nice language. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't use offensive words.
Right.
It tries to be, touchy-feely and nice, but it's not. It profoundly misunderstands the situation, and it doesn't actually respect the employee in transition.
Right. It seems like it just sort of puts it all back on them to be like, well, don't cause any problems and don't make people uncomfortable. And if they are uncomfortable and they do say something offensive, just pretend that it didn't happen and tell them it's okay.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, I don't get mad at people who make mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen. I answer my phone with the wrong name. Like, I've done it. Like, I answered my phone with that name for, I guess, however long I've had a phone. I almost said like 30 years, but I definitely haven't had a phone since I was 2.
Right. Probably didn't talk at that point either. So.
Yeah, probably not. But like at least 20 years of answering the phone a certain way. And so, you get used to it. And the biggest thing is I give people a break if they're making an honest mistake.
Right.
You can kind of tell the difference.
Like your grandmother's not making an honest mistake. She's just
she's
being a
not.
jerk.
I told her not to, and then she kept doing it. And my biggest thing is like strangers. Mm-hmm. So I've gone to right after Christmas. I was returning a piece of jewelry at a jewelry store, and the employee misgendered me, mm-hmm. and I was like, and I was telling a friend about it, and they were like, "Oh, it was probably just an honest mistake." And I was like, so you see a person in front of you wearing makeup, jewelry, lipstick, with long hair in a dress. Do you call that person sir? Like,
or I mean, if you're not sure, maybe you can just not pick. You can
just not pick. Like, that's what I was like. If you're really, really uncertain, you can avoid it entirely. It's not that hard.
I mean, it almost honestly seems to be harder to make that point than just to say, "Hi, what can I help you with today?"
Exactly, and it was just there's no way that they weren't doing something on purpose there, because
I mean, I guess the most charitable explanation, maybe they got nervous or something, but still.
Exactly. But like once you get one, if you keep doing it, like, come on. That's just kind of how I feel about it. I mean, but for coworkers, like, yeah, you've called me my old name for a long time. Sometimes you're going to say it wrong.
Right.
Sometimes you're going to say the wrong pronoun. It's because you were used to it. It's because your brain has a hard time getting this through. You will get there in time. As long as things get better over time, I'm fine.
Right.
I did actually make a formal complaint at one point because people were still screwing it up. And I said, look, I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I don't want you to have to sit down with these people and give them a stern talking to. I'll talk to them myself, but I want it noted so that if a year from now this is still going on, I don't come to you and then you say, well, you never complained about it before.
Right. We didn't know it was a problem.
So that's the most that's had to be done. Everything else has worked fine. The dreaded, this document had, of course, bathroom stuff in it. It actually told me that I was only permitted to use a single bathroom in the entire building that was like a single stall gender neutral bathroom. And I was like, nope. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I actually went to architecture school too, and so much of this is like, we could all just avoid this question if we just had like better bathroom design. You know?
I know. It's so.
Anyway, let's not go too deeply into that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about your other experiences in the legal profession. Because I mean, you mentioned that you've been going to court this whole time. I mean, how did people react there?
Yeah, so let's see, a week or two after I came out, I had to go to court.
Wow.
And it was awful.
Yeah.
I badly did not want to put on a suit and go to court. But I had not started transitioning it at all. I didn't own really like any clothes. I couldn't really present as femme very well. And so I was just like, all right, I'm just going to throw on my old suit and tie and go to court with my old name because I hadn't changed it legally. Mm-hmm. And I went and I won and I came home and felt miserable about it. But I got it over with.
Right.
And I didn't go to court again for a while. It just didn't come up.
Mm-hmm.
The next time I went, I had already changed my name legally. So I'm sure this varies state to state, but anyone who's in my position, honestly, anyone who's ever had to change their name for marriage or whatever reason you changed your name, the bar, at least in Virginia, does not recognize your name change until you change it with them specifically.
Wow.
And it's not even just a form. I had to petition the Supreme Court of Virginia to give me permission to practice under my new legal name.
Wow. So this is after you've already gotten a new legal name. They're demanding this.
Yeah, it was really silly. And I filled out the petition with she and her, and I got back an order with he and him. So I almost, but I did not.
Interesting.
But yeah, I got
interesting, that one.
Yeah, I want to just believe it was a mistake, but whatever, who knows? Some clerk might just be a jerk. But I got my new bar certificate and I have everything with Visla on it. So that got changed. But I had to appear before that had gone through. Mm-hmm. I was like, I filed it. So I've done everything I can do, but I'm not going to stop practicing law while I wait for the Supreme Court to decide if it's okay for me to change my name.
Okay. And how did people react?
Very well. I mean, I think this is something that would vary a lot. And it's a sensitive subject with trans people, but at least in court attire, I pass relatively well.
Okay.
And it's
very manly anyway for most women's suits.
It's funny. My attire before was obviously like super, super traditional. You know, you just wear a boxy suit and grace. I had a whole closet full of gray suits and like very boring ties and white and blue button-up shirts. Mm-hmm. My attire since then has been much more colorful, but still, I mean, I just wore a skirt and a blouse, and I think I actually wore like a little like sweater coat over top of it.
That sounds cute.
It was pretty cute. I was pretty proud of myself. Amusingly, I wore the coat because my blouse didn't cover my entire forearm. And one of the other things that I did when I transitioned is I have a tattoo that goes all the way up my left arm. Mm-hmm. And I think, honestly, there are people at the courthouse who would have more of a problem with me having a tattoo than with whatever my gender identity is.
Like, where would you want? We just don't want to see your tats.
Exactly. So I was just like, okay, cover that up. But no, I had no issues. Everyone was very respectful. People gendered me correctly. Nobody asked any weird questions. The thing is, court's very transactional. I mean, you get up there, you say what you need to say, they say what they need to say, everything kind of gets done. And there's much less examination of you as a person than you would imagine. Like, you feel very much in the spotlight, but like nobody cares like anything about you. And in fact, the way that you're generally addressed in court doesn't, like, I didn't have ma'am or sir come up at all. They were just like counselor, which is, right. God, I wish there was just a gender neutral. I wish everyone would just call me counselor. Like, that would be much easier.
Yeah, too bad you're not a doctor. Then you should be doctor or whatever. No,
I know some lawyers who go by doctor. They're
interesting. No, I mean, I think in court, everyone's playing a role. I mean, the judge I worked for, his mother was an actress. And when he first came on the bench, she literally coached him on how to appear more judge-like. And he was very different, on the bench and off the bench. So yeah, it is like we're all just going in and play acting our roles, and no one really cares about the individual person at all.
Exactly. And so that went very smoothly. I was concerned that I was going to have to interact with the court as a party since I'm going through a divorce. And one of the things that I was really concerned with in talking to my divorce lawyer was, if we get contested and have to go through things like that, is the court going to treat me badly because I'm trans? Like,
right, I mean, that happens a lot with kids, right?
Exactly. And I'm like, am I going to have a really hard time? And my initial take on that was, yeah, like, if you fight, you'll lose, right? Because you're just going to be mistreated.
Well, I mean, you're going to be, I would say, I mean, my non-family lawyer answer is like, you're going to be at least at high risk of that happening.
Exactly. But as it happens, my divorce attorney has a trans woman lawyer working at her office. She said, if anything, the courts have been, deferential towards her. Like, they're trying hard to make sure that there's not even like the appearance of impropriety. Right. And so that made me feel a lot better. Fortunately, it hasn't come to that. I haven't had to go to court as a party, but it makes me feel better that the courts are trying. Ideally, it wouldn't be that they're bending over backwards for us. They would just treat us like normal people. But given the choice between bending over backwards to appear fair and just, flagrantly abusing us, I'll take the former.
Right. Yeah, of course. I mean, other places we hear about, lots of terrible things happening. So yeah, if they're making a little extra effort to be polite, at least, go for it. Right.
Exactly. So that experience has been a little bit different than my girlfriend. Mm-hmm. So
tell me a little bit about that, because I know she's also a lawyer, pending lawyer.
No, she's a lawyer.
Okay.
She passed the bar and a little bit later than me. And we both practice in the same state, in the same area. But she came out during law school.
Okay.
And that made things markedly harder for her.
Interesting. Because of the reaction of the school, or for what reasons?
I don't think she had that much trouble in school. It's just that, the legal profession in small towns and even in bigger towns like Virginia Beach is still very conservative.
In terms of giving job interviews and things?
Yep. She literally got through an entire job interview And the person interviewing told her directly, I would hire you if you weren't trans.
Wow.
Like, just straight to her face said that. That's horrible.
Yeah, that's
But
not nice.
that's the situation right now.
Right. I mean, and exactly like what's she going to come back with? That's discriminatory? No. I mean, you can't, like we discussed earlier, there's not really like a clear pathway to that at this point.
Right. And do you really want your first job to be one that you got by court order? Like,
right. Your first job is fighting for your job.
Yeah, exactly. So I had the benefit of working somewhere that I can tell you, if I had tried to come out in my first job, things would not have gone well.
Okay.
I'm sure they would have complied with the laws as they interpreted them, but there would have the coworkers would not have been pleasant. Mm-hmm. And if I had been out when I was interviewing, I don't think I would have gotten the job. Mm-hmm. Because I was reprimanded for growing my hair long
at the first job.
Yeah, like that's the kind of place this was.
Yeah.
I have had long hair, like basically as long as I was old enough to decide what length my hair was. And the first thing I had to do to get that job was cut my hair. And if it ever even got like slightly long, like they'd be like, no, you look like a hippie, cut your hair.
It's just so ridiculous.
It's completely ridiculous. But that's what she has had to deal with, is places like that. And she's just completely open. Like, she's not going to hide anything about it. And so that's the kind of reaction she gets, which is unfair and horrible. And I hate to have to like give the advice, but honestly, if you are concerned and you are not out yet and it's not killing you, get a job first. Like, I hate to say that. I hate to give such cynical advice, but depending on the place you live, like if you live in an open, accepting place, like live your best life, come out as soon as you can, as soon as you're comfortable, and just go for it. But if you live somewhere where you're worried that it might affect things, get a first job. Because once you have that first job and once you have those recommendations, it's much harder to get rid of you than to just not hire you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, that makes me sad to hear you say that. I think it's realistic. I mean, there's also a pretty big qualifier in there if it's not killing you.
I don't think that if you asked Lexi, my girlfriend, she would say, like, no, I'm glad it's not worth it. It would not be worth just like living in the closet for like 6 years to get a job or whatever. But right. Like, if let's say you're like taking the bar right now and interviewing and you're debating what to do, like, hey, can you hold off for a few months?
Right. It's kind of like you going to court once in your suit, but you're not going to keep doing that.
Like, it sucked. I went home and cried, but it was worth it. Like, because I'm not sure I would have won that case if I had tried to like cobble things together and argue with the judge about what my name was in the middle of.
Right. Just slightly distracting, possibly. I mean, what advice do you have for people who are in these more conservative areas? I mean, do you think it's worth it to stay there and try to make this work? Or is it more, I mean, I guess for me, like, from rural North Carolina, I was just like, I got to get out of here. And
I have a lot of friends who have made that choice, even specifically from rural North Carolina. I know a few people who have moved here to Virginia from North Carolina because of the hostility towards transgender people. One big piece of advice I would give is consider that if you're taking the bar,
right,
and where you want to take the bar, because reciprocity can be really difficult.
Consider a UBE state. New York is one of them now. Can't hurt.
Yep. I mean, Virginia is very bad about giving reciprocity and therefore is very bad about getting it from other states. And so I'm kind of imprisoned here, unless I want to just like completely retake the bar and uproot my life. And I have a kid, it's never going to happen. But, if I knew earlier in my life, I would seriously have been like, maybe I want to practice somewhere else. Maybe I want to go up north or out west. If you have the freedom to consider those options, consider them. Because once you settle down and take the bar somewhere and pass, and more importantly, once you start making connections in the legal community, your law is not a super mobile profession. It just isn't.
No, it's
There's
definitely not.
so much you have to learn to move. Even if you're legally permitted to go practice somewhere, you have to retrain yourself so heavily on how things actually work out there. So, hey, if you can't wait, at least consider where you want to land.
Right.
And if it ends up being a bad decision, you can always change it, but at least make your best first decision.
Right. I would say I would really suggest someone in this scenario probably should take a UBE state bar. So you've got at least, 30 options, probably more every year.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, unfortunately, California is not among those people, but
Yep, nor is Virginia. So
right.
I'm surprised New York went that way.
New York. Once New York fell, I feel like everybody else is on that pathway anyway. So give yourself options.
Absolutely.
Well, we are way over time, but before we
There's plenty of my rambling you can edit out.
No, this has been really fascinating. I guess my final closing question is, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but what is somebody who's listening to this who's like, okay, I'm down with this. Like, this sounds cool. I'm totally fine with somebody coming and telling me that they're trans, femme, non-binary, whatever. What can people do to be supportive allies?
It's a tough thing to do, but the biggest and most important thing I think you can do is stand up for us when you hear things. And not just when we're around,
right?
But you are going to hear transphobic things. You may not realize it until you start thinking about it and start learning about it. But every day I hear someone say something transphobic.
Really?
And, guaranteed. It ranges from mild to severe.
Right.
But, gosh, don't turn on any television from the 90s.
Well, yeah, I don't really watch TV, so I'm probably missing out on a lot of this.
Yeah, it's for the best. But if you go watch stuff from earlier, gosh, we were awful. But anyway, you'll hear people say stuff like this. And it is an enormous help if the burden doesn't have to fall to the targeted person to stand up and say, don't do that. That's wrong.
Right. Or, hey, that's not cool. I don't appreciate that.
You can hear that from someone that they identify with, that they see as part of their little group. It's much easier for them to accept it than to hear it from what they view as an outsider, someone that they're already marginalizing. I do my best to stand up for myself and to stand up for, my fellow LGBT folks, but it's hard and it can be dangerous depending on where you are.
Right.
So the best thing allies can do is be an ally even when your trans friend or acquaintance isn't around, with your friends in your friend group, in your professional circles. When you hear someone using unnecessarily gendered terminology, or when you hear someone, laughing about some silly bathroom situation, just be like, that's not acceptable. Like, why would you say that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, what?
Just because as long as people are not challenged, they'll keep doing it.
Right.
They don't even recognize it as being a problem. And hearing that it's a problem from someone that they respect goes a long way. So we would appreciate it.
I think that's excellent advice. So one other question before we close up. Are there some general resources or sources of support that you personally recommend to people who are maybe questioning their gender identity, or maybe they know they're transgender, but they haven't decided to share that information?
Yeah. So like we discussed earlier, a lot of the LGBT outreach groups are good. GLAAD is good. There are kind of like crisis lines. There's a trans lifeline. I'm sure you can throw some of them down in the show notes for people, but there is help out there. And the same with kind of the legal resources. I would look to your local groups. In a lot of cases, there are Equality Virginia is one that operates here in Virginia that does a really good job and provides a lot of really good resources. Mm-hmm. I have been introduced to a lot of trans support groups and people who can help me through the local Planned Parenthood, which is something that people may not necessarily.
Yeah, I would not have expected that.
It's one of the number one places you can go for non-gatekeeping hormone therapy. So they have a lot of resources for trans people. But there is help out there, and there are people like us out there, and you're never alone. So
awesome. Well, any closing thoughts or advice you'd like to share?
I don't think I can sum up anything in like a beautiful, pithy phrase, but just live your best life and let other people live their best lives. There's no reason that anyone should be stuck being the sort of person or the gender or the orientation or whatever that they don't want to be. And so make it easy for yourself to be whatever you want to be, and make it easy for everyone that you know to be whatever they want to be, because there's no reason to stop them.
I like it. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and insight. This has been really useful and interesting.
Thanks for talking to me.
Oh, my pleasure. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app, because we would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee or Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at, you guessed it, lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.